Hi, I'm Dr. Charlotte Klessman. I'm here to talk to you about how to do your best as a student at ABAC or anywhere else for that matter. So for right this minute, I want to talk to you about what you can do to be the best student you can be and get the most bang for your buck out of the money that you're spending here at ABAC as a student, but also to help prepare you for graduate school if that's where you plan to go, or for that executive office in the corner suite, since I know that anyone who goes to college, they have it in them to be a manager, to be a CEO, to get to the top of whatever field it is that they are in. And these are the skills that you're going to need to accomplish that. This is how to study. It's based on the book 10 Practices of Highly Successful College Students, and you can get that book at the library. It's on reserve for you. But I also wanted to do a little lecture and post this online so that you have access to it, because this is something you really should stay in touch with, review it. Think about how you want to change your life so that you can be a successful student, and later so that you can be successful in whatever field it is that you want to go into. So we're going to start with Chapter 1, Managing Your Time. Time management is huge, and it can make the difference between your success as a student or not, and your success in, like I said, whatever your personal or professional life might be when you leave here. So it's critical to your college success that you learn these skills. How are you going to use your time effectively? So first you need to think about how are you spending your current time and what do you want to do with your time in the future. So it takes discipline. I'm not saying it's easy, far from that. So it's going to take discipline. You're going to need to want to do this, and but it'll be worth it, I promise. So time management skills. First off, you need to change your attitude towards time. You need to want to be productive with your time, and you want to have your time utilized in a way that highlights your priorities. You want to give your priorities first priority. See how that works? So there may not be enough time for you to do all the things that you want to do and all the things that you have to do. So you're going to have to make some decisions. So most important, remember why you're here. Why are you at college? This time crunch eventually is going to end. Eventually you'll walk down that stage and receive your diploma and go galloping back to your seat so you can throw your hat in the air. But until that time, you're going to need to manage your time in a way that benefits your schoolwork. So the strategies that you can use to use your time productively, they're pretty basic, but I'm going to go over them anyway. So you need to set limits on how much time you allocate for different activities and avoid situations that encourage you to waste time. So you need to fill that dead time when you do have it with something productive. So if you're waiting in a line, like say at the bookstore when you're getting your books at the beginning of the semester, might be a little early then, but if you're waiting in any kind of line, if you're on a bus, on a plane, if you're traveling as a passenger in a car, these are times when you can flip through your notes, when you can make yourself a set of note cards so that you can review all the main facts. I used to do that a lot. I called it my cheat sheet, but it wasn't really. Take a piece of paper like this, and I used to fold it like that so it's a little more manageable, and write some of the key points on it, carry it around with you, and review it whenever you have a couple of minutes to spare. This helps you memorize things. So what are the strategies that you can use to fill up time? Think about it. How might you utilize that time that would otherwise be wasted waiting in line? Master schedules are really, really important. This is the best way to control how you use your time, is to set up a schedule. And the master schedule will provide you an overview. This one's not exactly tailored for public, for communication, human communication, but it gives you an example. And as you look at your degree, especially if you're coming in as freshmen, and even if you're a sophomore, junior, or even a senior, this is a good tool to look at so you can see what are you going to be doing for each year that you're at ABAC? Each 2 semesters or the summer, if you're going to go to summer school, what are your plans? What classes do you want to take? So you've got an overview of your entire time as a student here. You can, that way you can get an overview. You sit down and consider your priorities too when you're building one of these schedules. So it's important. That way you have a clear idea in your head what it is you want to do while you're here and how you're going to accomplish that. So you'll have a mental overview of your expectations for each semester, each month, and eventually each week and each day. So here's another example. This one's a weekly schedule, and this one's set up for your classes. Also, save yourself time to do things like eat, sleep, shower, that's important, laundry, those kinds of little things. Let's see, what slide am I on? I can't tell. So here's another daily planner. Make sure that your daily planner is easily accessible. I'm an old-fashioned girl. I like a paper one. And I carry it around in my purse, and it's really too big because I try to cram too much on there. So I'm slowly moving to the digital, which probably come naturally to you. So think about putting something in on your phone or on your website or online in that cloud that you're open. If you got your computer open all the time, find something that's easy for you to use because you're going to have to go in and change things. This is a living document. So as your schedule changes, as your life priority changes, as you get to the end of the semester, beginning of a new one, you can go in there and alter your schedule. So you should include important dates and times, like say your classes, particularly your communication classes, and the things you value, like maybe every weekend you get together with your friends, or there's a TV show that you really don't want to miss, Game of Thrones. So if you got something really important, be sure to put it on your schedule. Make time for eating, sleeping, bathing, homework, very important, studying. Don't forget the basics. And give yourself time to have a little fun too. See your friends. But make sure you don't let it take away all of your time. Like I said, you need to budget. So your priorities, here's another daily schedule. I like this one because it's color-coded. It's easy to look at a glance and see what all is going on. So priorities and planning. You need to be strong and make those tough decisions. You should base your priorities on 3 things: basic obligations, responsibilities, and commitments. So if you have a job, if you have a family, if you have a significant other, if you have a pet, got to take care of that goldfish. So, consider those things. Those things need to have a place in your calendar. What are your values? You express your values by the way you use your time. And also, what do you do to relax and have fun? So, every choice, just remember this now, every choice, every act, every dollar you spend is a value statement. And that's a quote from the 10 Practices of Highly Successful College Students, which is where I got this lecture from. So remember this when you experience value conflicts. Which is more important to you at that moment, your friends or studying? Is it your family or your job, or is it your school? And I'm not saying one is right or the other is wrong. You just need to make these decisions. Be aware of it. Don't just fall into the habit of going whichever is the easiest or making spur-of-the-moment decisions. You need to have a plan in place so when you have to make a decision about that value, you have already laid a little groundwork. You know where your values lie. Getting started. You need to make a basic calendar strategy. So I like a monthly overview. I like to have at least 4 weeks, when I can see what's going on, especially since while my classes tend to stay fairly steady, we might have a day off. We get Christmas, Labor Day, Memorial Day, that kind of thing off. So you need to have a month just in case that week that you're looking at happens to have a holiday on it. So you make a list. What are things that you have to do and what are things that you want to do over the month? And how much time do you need for each activity? This is important. Most of us can figure out to make a list of what it is we're going to do. How much time is that going to take? And remember, in my experience, it usually takes twice as much time as you think it's going to. So be sure to err on the side of more time than you actually think. Try to be as accurate as you can. So rank these things in importance on a scale of 1 to 5. And then you can lay it out in order, which is most important. Your job, your school, family, maybe adjust those a little bit. And then you can get them organized in your calendar. You start with the things that you labeled as 1 most important, put them in the calendar, and then come in and fill in the holes with everything else. And put in all your deadlines too. If you've got a deadline for a future project, if you've got an important date, somebody's birthday that you need to remember, be sure to put those in and list the appropriate amount of time. So if you've got birthday that you're putting down, and it's yours in particular, you need to put down how long you plan to have a party, maybe 2 hours, so that you can allocate time for that. And how long is it going to take you to prepare for that party? You need to put the time in there for that too. Figuring out how much time you're going to need for each event, that can be tough. So create a detailed time log of activities for over a 1 to 2 week period, and try to break it in 1 to 2 hour segments. Think of it as like keeping your financial accounts. I have, once upon a time, saved all of my receipts, and at the end of the week I would total up how much I spent and what I spent it on. And that way I found out, gee, I was spending a whole lot more money on, just impulse purchases that I didn't realize I was spending that much. So I was able to cut back on that spending and send that money to buy more books, which made me very happy. So you can do the same thing with your time budget. Take 2 weeks, write down everything that you're doing, how much time it takes. Then you can go back and list the activities. Maybe you find an activity that wasn't on your original list. You can list them, rank on importance on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 is the most and 5 is the least important, and how much time did you need for each activity, and list your priorities, put them in your calendar, and then you can modify the schedule over the 1 or 2 weeks to have something that'll show the discrepancy. So you got time, you can improve the fit as you work on your calendar and you actually live the events. Like I said, this is a living document, so don't hesitate to change it. Okay, remember, this is your life, and this calendar should be treated as a living document. Update it regularly. You don't want to have any little, little mistakes that are still floating around in the background, something that you forgot to take out that's throwing you off your stride with your calendar. So your priorities are going to change. Be aware of that, and consciously choose to have your priorities influence your behavior through explicit attention. Demonstrate your values, your priorities through your actions. Very important. Procrastination. I hate to call it evil, but we all have a little bit of that built into us, some of us more than others, but there are ways to overcome procrastination. First of all, one thing that always gets me upset, or gives me a reason to not get started, is if I don't feel comfortable about the assignment or about the instructions. If there's one thing that I'm not sure if I can do it or not, do I have all the resources that I need? Go and address that right away. Sometimes that's all it takes, is to just get over that one hump, ask questions. You should be able to find me. I'm in King 110, and I'm online, and I answer my email, and you have D2L, so you should be able to find me. And if I'm not in my office, I'll probably be in the classroom. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask me. If you have somebody else that you need to ask, be sure to ask them. Most people will be happy to help you if you have a question, especially if it's somebody, faculty here at ABAC, or an administrator, or anybody else here would be happy to help you. Divide your larger projects into smaller ones, because sometimes it can be really intimidating to look at this enormous project. Let's see, getting a 4-year degree at ABAC. Don't get overwhelmed by looking at the entire project. Break it into smaller bites, like say, classes. Break it into individual classes. You can break those classes into weeks, which I have. I've got the calendar for your class set up in D2L. And look at that, look at where all the major projects are. I'm going to have you write a paper, because I think every class should involve a paper. And rather than looking at that and getting completely overwhelmed, break it into parts and say, okay, I'll finish this one this week, and then the next week I'll start on that. So you have a schedule you can follow, and then as you knock off each one of those sections, you can scratch it off your list. That always makes me feel good. So divide your task into 30-minute segments too. If you, once again, focusing on something that's difficult, that's new, it's hard work. So give yourself a little break, not too long, not longer than 30 minutes. So work on your project for 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and then take a little break, 5 or 10 minute break, walk around, take a deep breath, text a little, and then get back to work. Do the hardest part first. This is my personal favorite. Do the hardest part first in any project, because you're fresh. You're still, maybe a little eager. Yeah, you got some of that get up and go left, and you're going to feel so good and get such a charge of energy once you scratch that off your list. Also, if you have problems, if you have questions, if something comes up you didn't expect, you still have time before whatever the project is due. You can go ask questions, you can go get those resources. So start with the hardest first and then work your way down the list. Also, talk to yourself. Encourage yourself. Tell yourself what a great person you are, and you're such a great student, and you know you're smart, and you know you can do this. So, and work things out, talking to yourself too. Practice out loud if you need to give a talk. Use the sound of your own voice to encourage yourself and to help. It'll help set all that information in your memory too. So use your voice and lower your standards. Sometimes average is good enough. Now, you overzealous A people with a 3.5 or 4.0 grade point average, I'm talking to you. Not to say that you should not do good work. I'm just saying that you don't have to have exceptional work all the time. Sometimes average or good is good enough. And know when to pull the plug. When is it that you should not get too carried away? Just, connect all the dots and then call it good and move on to the next project. So remember that the time management skills you develop now will benefit you for the rest of your life. Like I said, this is an important phase in your life where you're learning to take on those skills, those life skills that you're going to need in your career. These are the things that make managers, that make CEOs, that make successful small business owners. So learn to pay attention, learn to dedicate your time, and to organize your life in a way that reflects your values. And of course, one must have references, so don't forget your reference sheet. And this is in APA style. Okay, thank you very much for listening. And here in a minute, we'll go on to Chapter 2. Okay, now we've talked about how to use your time. Now we're going to talk about effective note-taking, Chapter 2. Note-taking is seriously important, not just because it gives you a reference so that you can review a lecture and help you remember what it is that you need to concentrate on with your textbook or any of your other material like in D2L, but it also helps you learn the information. The more you repeat the information, the more you go over it, the more you review it, the better you're going to remember it, the better you're going to learn it. So be sure to take notes. And if you cannot get to a class, you can borrow other people's notes. But the act of taking your own notes is very important. You should take your own whenever possible. So it's reasonable to expect that you're going to spend about 12 hours or more per week attending lectures. You should make the best of it. That means take notes. You're going to forget about 60% of the lecture within an hour after class. The minute you hit the door, that stuff is leaving your brain cells. So take notes. It not only helps you to review the material later, but it will help you remember a little bit more of that 60% that you were going to lose because you took notes. Be prepared to take notes. Don't just wander into class, rubbing the sleep out of your eyes and all tired and hungry. No, you need to come to class prepared. Study before class. Read assignments. Bring in any work that you were asked to do. Any exercises that you were supposed to complete, all written work that was required, bring all of that into class and bring the necessary tools. That means your textbook, a notebook, and something to make marks on the paper with. So be sure you have all of those basic things. Find a good seat. And it's statistically proven that A and B students sit in the front 2 rows. That way the teacher is more likely to know your name. It's easier when we're in smaller classes at ABAC, but still. And you have a good view, you have fewer distractions. It's just better if you sit in the front rows. So keep that in mind. Generally A and B students sit in the front 2 rows. Be sure to listen attentively, and we will cover listening attentively when we get into the class. I usually stress this. Once again, listening attentively, listening well is a skill that successful people, successful business people, successful professionals are good listeners. Listening effectively. There's a little preview here. So it's critical for academic and professional success. You have to be a good listener, and you can improve your listening skills by being willing. Expect to be interested. Listen for details. So when I say willing, don't come in there thinking, this is a waste of my time. Why did I have to get up? Who made me sign up for an 8 o'clock class? No, you need to be willing. Come in with an open mind. Be a focused listener. That means concentrate. Concentrating is hard, very hard, but it's a learnable skill. And one way you can do that is to be an engaged listener. You can connect what you're hearing the speaker say with things that you already know. And that's a good way to learn and to remember things too, if you can connect new information as you're getting with things that you already know. Also, identify key points. I try in my lectures to have PowerPoints so that we'll highlight key things and to give you a structure so that you can move from one idea to the next, and that will make it easier for you to be engaged. You can follow along what's going on. If you missed a step, you can go back to the PowerPoint or to the notes and see what it is, where it is that you dropped the ball. Also, ask questions. You need to be, that's one way to be engaged, is to take part in the discussion and also to participate. Asking questions is one way to do that. If you have an example in your life that you want to share, if you have a story that's appropriate for the classroom, if you have an example, anything like that that you think would add to the academic discussion in the classroom, speak up. I want to hear from you. So participate as fully as possible given the circumstances in the classroom. I mean, during testing, generally not such a good thing, or when other people are presenting, but you know, there's always a time when you should be an active participant in class. That's important. It'll help you focus and it'll help you with your note taking. Don't transcribe everything that you hear. Just select the good stuff. I try not to transcribe or not to write down anything that I already know. I try to concentrate on stuff where I went, wow, I didn't know that, or I didn't think I could connect those things, but I guess that's going to work. So anything that stands out for you or that you didn't understand or that you're afraid you're going to forget, write that down. So write down essential concepts and ideas. Look for structure. Like I said, I try to build structure into the lectures, and I try to use PowerPoints too to help you move from one point to the next without writing everything down I'm going to say, because then I could just post the PowerPoint. You wouldn't need to have me talking. You could read for yourselves, you're college students. So try to look for what's highlighted. Try to look for what the lecture stresses. And if it's not a well-organized lecture, which can happen to the best of us, and this isn't the only class you're going to take, you can use these ideas too in your other classes. So if the lecture isn't well structured, try to find something for yourself that will help you organize the ideas. So a few techniques are, once again, to sit near the lecturer. That way you can hear more easily, you can see, it's easier to read the material on the overhead of the board, and if you're right underneath the speaker's gaze, like right there, it's easier to concentrate. You're getting that eye contact, you're getting some of that energy from the speaker. Also, organize your class and your reading notes. Use different notebooks for different topics. That's very important, or at least different sections. I used to like the 3 to 5 section notebooks so I could keep all of one semester in one spiral back binder, but it had tabs and I could just go to the tab for each class. Be sure to label and date your notes. If today's lecture is going to be about public speaking, put something like public speaking at the top, and outlining or persuasive speech or informative speaking, whatever it might be, put those things in there. That'll help you find what it is you're looking for when you're reviewing. Also I like to start each lecture or each section of note-taking, start with a fresh page at the top, so it's easier to find when you're flipping through your notebook. It's also good to use your own shorthand. Here's a version of mine, so that you can write a little faster. So make up some characters. It doesn't have to be this. And it doesn't have to be official shorthand either. Write your own, and that way you can take notes a little more quickly. Be sure to write legibly and use wide margins. That way, if you need to add something, or you got something wrong, or you missed something and it gets repeated later in the lecture, you can go add that in. And listen for the speaker's cues or signposting. Like, in the beginning, we'll talk about this, and then we'll go to this, and then for the third thing, we'll do this, and then at the conclusion, we'll do this. That's called signposting. It's a common thing for public speakers to do, and good lecturers will do that for you. They'll help you keep track of where you're at. So separate your thoughts too from those of the lecturer. Be sure, I put brackets around my comments. You can do whatever you want. Maybe you like to use colored pencils. You could write everything that you say in green because it's fresh and growing and thoughtful, and everything the speaker says in red. So something to separate your comments from the speakers. A lot of this has to do with quoting. if you're going to quote something from your notes when you're writing a paper or writing an essay of some kind, it's good to know what it is you heard in the lecture and what it is you came up with yourself. Be sure to edit and revise your notes, and within the first 24 to 48 hours is the best, because within 24 hours you're going to lose 60% of what you heard in the lecture. So go through right away and type up your notes is what I like to do. Type up your notes and correct, clarify, etc. Anything else that you need to do. Okay, I admit some things it's hard to type, like if you're doing math figures, or when I was taking statistics, there I had to go back and correct it on the paper. But do go back and revise your notes. Make sure that they're clear and easy to read. If you need help with note taking, you can come and talk to me or to your instructor. Generally, we'll help you out either before or after class. Taking notes from a text. Just because you're reading a book doesn't mean that you don't have to take notes. You need to take notes while you're doing a reading assignment. That's why I like textbooks that have big fat margins and lots of space in between, and the paragraphs and everything, because then I can write detailed notes in the margins of the book. And, circles and arrows and colored pens like this one has. Doing all of this, writing your notes in the margin, underlining, highlighting, this helps you concentrate. It helps your memory. So doing all these physical things to match your reading helps you remember the work, and it will make studying for a test later on much easier. Also, I've noticed that if I read something and then go, I like that, I'm going to go back and highlight it. Then I read it again as I'm highlighting it. So I'm reinforcing that just by writing the note or by putting it on my own words when I write a little note in the margins there. So anything like this will work. My example here, maybe the student got a little bit carried away. Have a note-taking checklist. So before the lecture, during the lecture, and after the lecture, you should have these 3 points are places where you should be paying attention to how you're setting yourself up to take notes. So before the lecture, you need to read the assignment, the book, any sections in D2L, go to any websites, anything else that was assigned, go over your notes from the previous class, and be ready to come in prepared. So have your notes updated and be ready to participate in class. Also look at the course, the assignments, the instructions, outlines, objectives, anything else like that. If you had an assignment that's due that same day, review your previous notes so you've got all that background information, and look at what the lecture content is going to be. And there again, I set calendars. I'll give you a calendar. It'll be in D2L, and I'll keep it updated. So you can go to that week and see what it is we're going to be doing, and that'll give you an idea of what you need to read, how you need to prepare for the class. And if you have other people that you're studying, I encourage study groups, by the way, discuss the ideas with your classmates. During the lecture, come to class. That's very important. Sit where you can see and hear. That's important too. Be ready to listen too. Like I said, you don't want to have any distractions. No phones, try to be well rested and well fed. Don't eat in class, but that's distracting. But come to class ready to work. Listen attentively too for main ideas so you can follow the lecture's organizational style or create your own. Use an outline form too. Don't write in paragraphs. For one thing, that's really it's difficult to read. Use bullet points so that you have, instead of full sentences, you have short phrases that when you read them make sense. Try to make them too so that they would make sense to somebody who didn't hear the lecture but knew about the topic, because later you may go back and you may forget. You read this statement and you go, what the heck, I don't know what was going on there. So try to be clear and concise. Leave room for additions and corrections too. Like I said, when you hear the lecture, you may have got something wrong or missed something. Make sure that you've got space to fill it in. And be sure to copy any material that was given to you. So after the lecture, review your notes immediately afterwards and reflect on them. Think about them. What did you write? What did you hear? And review them. Review all the important stuff so you'll retain that information. There again, for especially text, I recommend typing it up. And I used to, I was a graduate student, I admit, but I did used to type up my notes and bring them to class. And I discovered that the times when I forgot my notes, the act of reviewing and typing really sets it in your mind, and it makes it easier for you when you have to go in and study for a test. And there are my references. Now that we've talked about note-taking in Chapter 2, now we're going to look at improving study and memory skills. So note-taking skills and study skills are very closely related. That's important. Just the act, as I've said, just the act of taking notes will help you study. It's part of the study process. So other important things to do for studying is find an appropriate place to study, place with good lighting where it can be quiet and you've got nice work surface, everything that you need. Schedule time to study, that's very important, and stick to your schedule. Your friends will learn and your biorhythms will learn that this is the time when you are there to study. Your friends will learn not to bother you, and you will learn, your mind will learn, okay, this is time to buckle down and work. So find a time, find a space to study. Set goals for each study session. What is it in particular that you're trying to do? So flip through your notes and through your assignments and say you have 2 hours to study every day. Oh, I know, quit groaning. It would be a good thing to study for 2 hours every day. Anyway, so go through your work and say, what is it I need to accomplish during this 2 hours? Focus and concentrate. This is hard, but it's teachable, it's learnable, and it will improve your work tremendously if you can focus and concentrate. And there again, one way to focus is to eliminate distractions. So put your phone on silence. That means no vibrating, nothing to distract you, no television on in the same place. Okay, I admit I like to have some music in the background, but it has to be quiet background music, not anything that's too excited that'll make me start singing and dancing instead of studying. So keep that in mind, something that will help you concentrate, not distract you. So the purpose of study is to increase understanding of the topic and help you remember the material. Remember, that is your goal. How to study. Like I said, this is a learned skill. You need to have a suitable study environment, as I was just saying. A desk, a table, someplace that's well lit. There's some really great spaces in the library that you can use here at ABAG. Have no distractions, no TV, no friends, no phone, nothing like that. You need to have no distractions, quiet. Find a time to study too. You need to find a time to study when you're at your most alert. And my dad always recommended first thing in the morning, and I still do well with that. Although late at night too, I kind of get a second wind. So learn what your biorhythms are. When is the time that's good for you to study? And try to schedule your study time for that time. And also take the things that are the most difficult and put them in the time when it's best for you to study, when you're at your most alert, your freshest. And study them first. Like I said before in Chapter 2. Yeah. Start with the hard stuff first. And when you're fresh, when you're still alert, when you can still work through those problems, and then you can move on to the less challenging things later on in your study period. So set small goals and take small breaks. Review earlier material. Always, if you're doing a review of your notes, you're getting ready to go over the stuff that was in the last lecture, do a review. Go over and look at what you've done through the semester. Run across your notes really quickly and review it. This will pay off in spades when you are ready to study for a test. This kind of work, this kind of review, helps set this in your memory. So even when you graduate from class, whatever the class may be, you'll still get out into your professional world or your personal world and you go, oh yeah, I remember that. This could come in handy. See, classes are here to make your life better, not just to, take up your time. So provide a chance to review and reinforce what you've learned. And remember that if you're less tired, you can retain more. That's why getting enough sleep, enough rest, enough food, enough exercise, all of those things are important. For the mind to work well, the body has to be in good shape too. Learning is a skill. You need to learn how to learn. So part of that is learning how to concentrate. Concentration means to focus on what you want to read, learn, and think about. That means that you have to be able to shut down all those distractions, inner ones and outer ones. If there is an annoying person cutting the grass outside your window and you have a little bit of an itch right there that just won't go away, you have to learn to block all of that out and concentrate on what's in front of you. So quiet environment will help. Have all the tools that you need right there where you can reach them easily so you won't have to interrupt your study to go find them, and make sure you've got enough to eat and enough sleep. You can improve your understanding with strategies for studying. One really good way to learn things is to paraphrase. Put the words that you hear in the lecture or that you get in the book, rewrite them in your own words. So when you are taking notes, when you're taking notes on your textbook reading or you're taking notes in class, try to rewrite it so that it sounds natural to you. If you were to say that to your friends, they would say, oh yeah, that's something that you would say, not, who did you get that from? Did you hear that from somebody else? So that will help you retain it and to understand it if you can put it in your own words. Think about the information from a different perspective, and by that I mean if you want to try sketching a picture, or you want to use a chart or a graph, or you want to have circles and arrows, something else like that. See if you can look at it from a different perspective, and that might help you learn it, help you see it from a new way, clarify it for you. Link what you're learning with what you already know, and this is really important. Just like you can't learn algebra until you understand that 1 + 1 is 2 and why that is, you have to be able to link all new knowledge with something that already exists. Otherwise, it won't make any sense to you. So as part of your learning, you need to connect what you already have with what you had before. Preview the book or the text before you read it. This was the hardest thing for me to do. I just want to start at the beginning and read from cover to cover. Not a good idea. Open up your book. So you've got a chapter to read for the class. Open up your book, and even before you start your chapter reading, look at the book. The front will have the table of contents, and look and see what are you going to learn in the book. What does it cover? And you open your chapter, you can read the headlines, the headings, and the titles, maybe look at the examples. Read the conclusion. The conclusion is a really good part because that will summarize all the important things in the book. Then go back and read the book. Read that chapter. You'll have, that way you'll have already previewed what it is that you're going to know, so you're not caught by surprise, or you've already started making some of those connections in your mind. So when you go back and reread them more carefully and you start taking notes, it will be easier for you to assimilate all this. When you're finished studying, when you've finished reading the book, review it again. So just like you previewed it by going over all the chapter headings and you looked at all the main headings in the chapter and you looked at the conclusion, go back and run your eye over that really quickly. Maybe read through the notes that you put in the margins, and that will help fix that in your mind so that when you do have to study for a test or when you need to remember this information, it will come more easily to you. Memorizing. Man, I hate that word. But there are some tricks you can learn that make memorizing easier. Focus, associate, and repeat to reinforce. Those are the key. So focus. Make sure that you can concentrate on what it is you're working on. That will make it easier for it to stick in your mind if you're not distracted. So associate. Connect what you're learning with something that you already know. E, G, B, D, F, with Every Good Boy Does Fine. If any of you study music, you'll know when you're doing the scales. And E, G, B, D, F would be the order that the notes come in, and this is how you can remember that. Repeat and reinforce. There again, if you've got time when you know you're going to be waiting in line, or you're going to be, waiting in between classes, you got 20 minutes between classes and it's not enough time to go back to your apartment or do anything, you can review your material, and this will help you memorize your work. You can use review in 3 ways. You can review immediately after study so that you can keep it fresh in your mind. Repeat review at the beginning of each study session, before a quiz or test or before assignment. So before you're going to need that information, you can review that information then. You can review cumulatively by including information from all earlier study sessions at the beginning or the end. So you can begin the beginning of your study session by reviewing all your notes briefly. Stuff that you had like a month and a half ago, you can just kind of read over that really quick. And the closer you get to the work that you're going to be doing that day, the more you can kind of dig in and concentrate a little bit more. This is, as an aside, also how you teach a dog to do tricks. Probably cats and other animals too, but you teach them by starting the day with reviewing things that they already learned, things that they're good at. That makes them feel good and happy and sets the stage, and then you teach them something new that you can connect to the thing that they just reviewed. Intention is very important. You have to want to remember something to successfully remember it. So organize and categorize so that way you can keep track of everything you learned. It's really difficult to memorize things if they're all in a jumble. You have to have some sort of structure, build a mental file cabinet, or have a mental chain, or a tree with the trunk being the main idea and the branches, the different associations that you have with it, so that you can keep all of this organized. And use more than one sense. And by that I mean read out loud, walk around while you're reviewing, pace. Make sure that there's nobody there that's going to get upset because you're pacing and driving them crazy. But this is a good way to help you memorize things. So if you're really interested in long-term learning, if you're concerned about real academic success, if you want to develop your intellectual powers, don't cheat yourself by cramming. This is not a good way to learn. Marathon study sessions will overload your memory and lead to confusion and poor retention. So yes, I understand that there are some times when cramming happens, but try to avoid them whenever possible because it defeats the purpose. You might do okay on the test, but not as good as if you had known the information properly and studied properly. And you're not going to remember it once that test goes and you leave the classroom. So the purpose is to remember all this cool information that you're getting at ABAC in your classes. It's important, or you wouldn't be asked to take the class. So study, memorize, do your best, and try to avoid cramming. And there are my references. So this is Chapter 4, Taking Tests, and it's from the book 10 Practices of Highly Successful College Students, which is on reserve at the library. If you're one of my students, you can get a copy. And this is to support your reading because, of course, as a good student, you're going to read the book too, right? Right. Okay. So these are some things that will help you do well on test, and I'm assuming that you did all the other things we talked about in chapters 1, 2, and 3. You are prepared, you have taken good notes, you have reviewed your notes, you've taken notes from your reading in your textbook. So you've done all the appropriate studying, not just the couple of days before the test, but you've also been studying across the semester. You've been keeping up with all your work. But you're still nervous, this grade's really important to you. How are you going to do this? How are you going to face it? So there are some things that you can do to avoid test anxiety, help you relax so that you'll do better on your test. First, get enough sleep. I know that can be hard, but going out and getting some exercise a day or two before the test, that will help. If you're tired, you burn off all that excess energy, and also exercise increases your endorphins, so you'll feel happier and more relaxed naturally. So get some sleep, get some exercise, relax, have a little fun. Don't get too worked up about the test. Deep breathing and relaxation can help before you go in for the test. Have a drink of water and maybe a really small snack like a piece of fruit or a couple of carrots so you won't be hungry, but not so full that you're going to fall asleep and get groggy during the test. Also, you can visualize yourself in your happy place, like a beach. Not too happy, because you don't want to completely wig out. You want to be able to focus on your test, but enough to make you relax so you won't have to worry about test anxiety. Here are some of the strategies, too, for taking tests. These are some skills that do not substitute for study, but they can help you improve your test score. So in those times when just a couple more points would have gotten you that A, this is the way to do that. Say you got an essay exam. You can follow these basic steps. First and foremost, make sure you understand the question and the instructions. Be sure to read that carefully, because I cannot remember how many times I have had to count off half people's points because they answered the first half of the essay question, but they didn't answer the other half. Or they answered incorrectly because they answered the wrong thing. So the question I think they were answering, it sounds like they got the answer right, but they didn't answer the question that I asked. So be sure to understand the question, and if you have questions, ask questions. I will ask you to raise your hand if you're in class and you have any questions. I'll be happy to come over and clarify. Brainstorm when you first sit down, and I usually let you can either use scratch paper or I'll offer you some. Sit down with that piece of scratch paper and write down all the information that you think you might forget. My dad was an engineer. When he was taking tests at Georgia Tech, he said he used to get that piece of scratch paper that they were allowed and write down all the formulas really quick before he forgot them. But mostly because you write them all down so that you don't have that brain freeze later on as you're working your way through the questions. You've got it all right there. It's kind of a security blanket. So write down keywords, abbreviations, formulas, definitions, all that kind of thing. Plan your answer, especially if you got a complicated essay question. Do a little outline really quick, just with, like one word or maybe a few phrases, and you can do this on your paper and then fill in the holes if you leave enough room in your outline, or you can do this on your scratch paper too. Budget accordingly. How much time do you have to take the test? Essay questions can get away from you. There again, I've seen a lot of people who start at the beginning of an essay test and they spend a lot of time on the first couple of questions, and then as they start to run out of time, they're writing faster and faster until they're really skimping on the tail end, the last couple of questions. So budget. Make sure you've got enough time to answer each question effectively. Be brief and to the point. That means, for me anyway, I usually ask for bulleted points. Occasionally I'll ask you to write in flowing paragraphs, something beautiful and nicely put together. Generally I ask you to give me bulleted points. If I'm concentrating on facts more than I am your perspective, then I'm going to ask you for bulleted points. If I want to know how you feel about something, then I'm going to ask you probably to write in a paragraph. But try to be to the point. Use key terms. That's very important. That demonstrates that you know the word that you're supposed to know and you know the definition. Use those key terms and concepts to create statements. So key terms and concepts, stress those when you're writing your essay. Organize it into an outline form. And that means no full sentences, once again. Leave a lot of space. As you're working on the next question, you may go, oh, yeah. And you got to go back and put that in the paragraph that you just finished. As long as I can read it and I can follow along what you're doing, then I'm okay with things that aren't as nicely formatted as maybe they would have been if you had time to write it at home. And reread your finished response and edit for clarity and completeness. So there's where this time budget comes in. Before you hand in your paper, reread everything. Reread your question first when you answer the question, then reread your entire paper and see, how does it go? Does it flow nicely? Can I understand it? Is it legible? And fix anything accordingly. For multiple choice and true-false exams, first, read the entire test. There'll be some of them that you can answer without even thinking about it. Oh yeah. In fact, one thing that I like to do is, especially with multiple choice questions, don't look at the questions if you or the answers, the selections, cover them up if you need to, and see if you know the answer. And then you can look down at your selection and go, oh, there it is right there. And so you can answer that question, fill in the bubble or whatever, and move on to the next. So go through and answer all the questions that you know the answer to. Skip the ones that are hard. You can come back to those later. There again, I've seen people who 3 questions in, they're stuck. And they don't know what the answer is for sure, and they just sit there and worry about that 3rd question until they're nearly out of time. So finish everything, then come back and do the hard stuff. If you've got 4 possible answers, and 2 of them are wrong, scratch those out. Don't mark on the paper if I told you not to, because if you're doing a Scantron exam, then you can't write on the paper because I use the test for the next class. But make some sort of a note or something to yourself on your scratch paper that these 2 aren't right. Then you've got 50-50 chance. There's only 2 left, so that improves your odds. Also, look for internal clues. And sometimes I do this on purpose. Sometimes teachers do it by accident. But sometimes there will be something in a question further down the list that has a piece of information that will answer one of the questions further up. So look out for these things. Sometimes you can find all or part of the answer to a question in another question. Also, options that have words like never, all, none, only, etc., those are almost never correct, because it's really difficult to have an absolute, especially in communication. It's very difficult to say, people would never talk like this under these circumstances. Well, if they're dead, then they won't talk. But that's the only thing I can think of. Or maybe even when they're asleep, they could talk in their sleep. So if it says never, all, none, anything else like that, probably not the right answer. If you're asked to finish a sentence, check to make sure that when you put in the answer that you're thinking about, this is fill in the blank for a sentence, if it's grammatically correct or not. And I actually check for this because I have thought of this one. If you read it with that answer in the sentence and it is not grammatically correct, probably not the right answer. Whoever wrote the test just didn't think that far ahead. So eliminate options with incorrect details. One of those details would be like the grammar. Look for little things that don't quite add up, that aren't quite correct, and eliminate those as possible answers. If you've got two answers that are similar, two of your choices are similar, pick the one that sounds the most complete, that's the best answer, because I do that pretty regularly. I'll have one answer that's correct, but it's not completely correct, and I'll have another answer that's more correct than the previous one was. So you need to pick the most correct answer. Matching exams. These are hard and they don't lend themselves to guessing, because if you make one mistake, it's going to throw everything off. If you got two columns of terms, if you got terms and their definitions and you are matching them, if you miss one, that's going to throw off at least one other. So if you miss one, you definitely miss two, and you might miss the whole block. So match the ones you're sure of first. Get those out of the way, and then look and see, start eliminating which ones are left and how do you think that they would go. So consider your remaining choices then. Cheating. I feel like I have to mention this. Cheating. Yes, it's tempting to buy somebody else's paper, and yes, I go online and I know how easy it is to buy a paper online. But believe it or not, teachers give you assignments for a reason. I know that it seems like, gee, I know we already did this, I'm getting so bored, you're just repeating the same thing over and over. That's what learning is, repeating over and over, trying to help you remember it, and then giving you a chance to use it. So that's usually what these assignments are for, is writing that paper that I was talking about. I want you to have a chance to use what you've learned, to think creatively, to use this information that you've gotten for yourself, to make it your own, to bring out your own new ideas and your own creativity. So that's why you are doing this work. It's not just to check a box. You need to do your own work. Think of the consequences too if you get caught, because, well, if I catch you cheating on one of my assignments, my standard rule of thumb is to give you a 0 for the assignment. And if I catch you twice, then I give you a 0 for the class. So you don't want to cheat. And it makes you feel bad about yourself, most of us anyway. It's a form of theft. So, don't do it. It also undermines not just your personal integrity, but also the integrity of the academic institution, ABAC's institution that you would undermine, and also just the educational system in general. You're part of an academic community as a student, and eventually as a professional, you'll be part of that community too. And professional communities don't take kindly to people who use other people's work and claim it as their own. So particularly in academia, we don't like it, but we're not the only ones. So you need to get used to doing your own work, taking credit for your own, your own place in that community. Cheating violates those rules and conventions and undermines the entire system. So you're part of this system now. You want to support it, because in supporting that culture, that system, you're supporting yourself. Also, plagiarism is cheating. That's one reason I've been pointing out my sources at the end of each of these chapters. If you are not citing your sources, you are, in one way or the other, claiming that someone else's creativity and new thoughts are your own. So you need to demonstrate that you can take someone else's creative ideas and you can build on that to create your own. You can stand on the shoulders of giants and create your own ideas, lift off from that point, and take the next step in whatever it is that you're trying to learn. So credit your sources. Also, it demonstrates that you know what you're talking about. You have reliable sources. You have literally done your homework. So cite, be sure to cite. So know what plagiarism is and what different forms it can take and how to avoid it, because accidental plagiarism is still plagiarism, it's still cheating. You need to know what this is. So to demonstrate that I cite my sources, there's my references page. Don't forget to cite.